Hi there, this is Brian. I'm the presenter on the webinar tonight. Sorry I'm starting a couple of minutes late, but I just had a bit of a technical issue there. But it all seems to be working well. So I can see we've got some people logged in, so thank you for coming. We may just wait a couple of more minutes to see if there's any late arrivals. Some people tend to get a bit held up, so we'll give it a couple more minutes before we get started. So if you haven't already, feel free to grab yourself a drink. Make sure you've got a pen and paper handy in case you want to take down any notes. And then just sit back and relax, and we'll get started in a couple of minutes. Okay, we might get underway now. It looks like everybody's here. So welcome. Thank you for registering for this webinar tonight. My name is Brian McAleer, and I will be presenting how to set boundaries for teenagers that work, which is the topic of this webinar. So I'd just like to say welcome. So I want to thank you for taking the time out tonight. I realize it's a bit later on in the evening. I thought this would be a good time to have the webinar if you're a parent of a teenager or you've got younger children. Hopefully they're winding down for the night and maybe tucked in bed. So this gives you a little bit of time now for yourself and also to listen in on this webinar. So welcome, and I'd like to just really commend you for registering for this webinar and taking the action. And I appreciate that your time is really valuable as parents. And it's a real privilege for me to be able to do this and speak with you. I'm very passionate about this topic, and very passionate about empowering teenagers and also empowering those who are closest to them, their parents, which is you. It's something I feel very strongly about, and I know that as a parent yourself, you face some challenges with raising teenagers. I'm not a parent of a teenager myself, but I have worked with teens for a long time, and I'm aware of the challenges that parents face today. And I talk to a lot of parents, so I thought it was really timely to start this webinar and reach more and more people in a way that was really easy and accessible. So if this is your first webinar, just to give you a little bit of housekeeping rules, if you are familiar with the webinar, you'll know that the best way to listen in is with a headset. So that's with the headphones and the microphone. Towards the end of the webinar, if you've got a microphone, I will unmute you and you can actually talk. The other option, if you don't have a microphone, is you can raise your hand if you have a specific question that you want to ask. You can also type your questions into the chat box, so feel free to do that. If you have any questions, do hang on to them, and we'll cover them towards the end of the session as well. So the purpose of this webinar essentially is for you to learn how to create boundaries that work for your teen and for you through discussion, planning, and compromise. And this is a really unique and holistic approach, because setting boundaries from an authoritative standpoint where it's just my way or the highway, it doesn't work with today's young people. Today's young people seem to be a bit more smarter, a bit more independent, and they really like to challenge authority. So it's important to discuss things with your teenager. Now, a lot of parents sometimes make the mistake where they try to be their teenage son or daughter's best friend. And it's fine to be friendly with your teenager, but I think it's more important to be a role model for your teenager. And you are a role model through the actions that you present to your teenager through what you do and what you don't do. So when it comes to setting boundaries, which is really important in terms of their adolescent development, it really helps to sit down and talk about what the problem is from your point of view. Get your teen to open up and talk about what they think is going on and what they think the boundary should be, and ask them if they think there should be a boundary in the first place. If they don't understand why you're trying to set this boundary, they're not going to be very responsive to it. So there has to be a mutual agreement from both sides. Planning the boundary. It's important not to set boundaries in a spontaneous way or when you're angry or in a reactive way. It's good to have a good think about it and include your teen in the planning stage within reason. Obviously, the buck stops with you, so you want to make that decision. And also compromise. Be willing to compromise and not have the brick wall parent approach, which is really important. We'll talk about that. Just before I go on, I'll just let you know that this webinar is being recorded. I do use these webinars as training tools, and sometimes they're uploaded onto the internet. If I refer to anyone on the webinar, I'll just refer to you by your first name, so I won't say your last name if you have any issues around that. It is being recorded, so if you have a question but you don't want to be recorded, it's best just to type it in the chat box and I'll be able to see that, and I can respond by talking over the webinar, so you don't actually have to speak. So yeah, just letting you know that it is being recorded. So a little bit about me. That's me there. I'm a qualified youth work practitioner, and I've been working as a youth worker now for about 8 years. I'm also a qualified life coach. I obtained my certificate 4 in life coaching through the Coaching Institute, which is the foundation skills of life coaching, and really worked my butt off to obtain that. So life coaching is quite a new thing. A lot of people don't quite understand what it is. It's not counseling, it's not psychology, it's more about the mentoring, the consulting, and the goal-setting side of things. But I do use coaching techniques in my day-to-day work, because coaching really is all about asking questions, really effective questions. So I have a qualification for that. 8 years experience working with youth, both here in Australia and overseas. I've worked in the United States on summer camps, which is where it all really began for me as a youth worker and a camp counsellor over there. Here in Australia, since taking my journey to be a youth worker and a youth coach, I've worked in schools, on camp programs, various youth programs, residential units, as case manager, and doing different kinds of presentations. So quite a broad area there that I've worked in. I really jumped into youth work and tried everything I could to find my feet. And I probably specialise in a couple of these things now, more specifically camps, case management, and presentations are my main thing these days. I'm also married. I'll be celebrating my first anniversary this weekend, actually, and my wife and I are expecting our first baby due in July. So that's just a little bit about me, so you know that I'm a real person. Cool. Now here we have just a snapshot of the video that I have up on YouTube at the moment. Some of you may have seen this. If this is what brought you to my webinar tonight, that's fantastic. If you haven't seen this, this is a 7-minute video which is on YouTube. As you can see just up there in the search, just type how to set boundaries for teenagers at work, and this video should come up straight away. The actual image that's represented for the video, so how it would appear over here, is a picture of a woman and a young girl talking. So that's how it will appear, just so you're able to find it. But yeah, just type that in and you'll come up with this video. This video is pretty much an introduction to the whole concept of setting boundaries for teenagers at work. Some of you may have a copy of my ebook at the moment, which is the Introduction to How to Set Boundaries at Work, which is that 15-page ebook. This video is basically taken out of that, and it's a 7-minute video with my audio and a bunch of photos, and if you have a look at that, that gives you a good overall understanding of the foundation of setting boundaries. So if you haven't had a look at that yet, I really recommend that you do. So, alright, so we'll formally get underway now. We've done all the introduction stuff. So firstly, I'd like to talk about why teenagers test boundaries in the first place. It's important to understand this because as a parent you'll be setting boundaries, and a lot of the time your teenager will really test it and push the boundaries to see what they can get away with. And I understand that this gets quite frustrating. because it feels like they're not listening to you and they're not respecting you. They are listening to you, they do respect you, but part of their development is to test boundaries, and I'll explain why. Teenagers test boundaries because they're trying to gain a sense of freedom. So think of teenagers as young adults in the making, which is exactly what they are. Obviously, they're still children in many ways, but if your teenager is 15, 16, 17 years old, your teenage son may be towering over you in height now. He's probably as big as his dad. His voice is broken. He's appearing very manly. He is a young man, and he's becoming a young man. Women, young teenage girls are becoming women as well. So they're still teenagers, but they're developing the body of adults, and in a lot of ways, they're developing the mind of an adult. But they're not quite there yet. Obviously, they still don't know a lot of things about life, even though they like to know, they pretend to know that they know everything. But they're very much on the cusp, so they're right between being a child and an adult. And they're beginning to discover as a teenager that they have a lot more freedom than they did when they were kids. And they look at adults and they get quite envious that adults can do whatever they want. Adults don't have to go to school. Adults don't have to do homework. Adults don't have to go to bed at 10 o'clock at night. Adults just seem to have this great life. So they want freedom, and they're starting to explore the options, and that life is starting to open up for them more. They also just test boundaries sometimes to get your attention, and it could be for the right reasons or the wrong reasons. Teenagers value attention a lot. They get attention from their peers, they get attention from their teachers, they're looking for attention from you. Sometimes the attention you give them might not be the attention that they're looking for. So understandably, parents have a lot of pressures on them, and sometimes some of you can only give your teenager a little bit of attention every day, and I totally respect that and understand that. You work hard, you have other responsibilities, and you also need your own time as well. So think about the kind of attention that you're giving your teenager. Is it enough time in their books? Are they getting enough of your time? Are you giving them enough of your time? When you are spending time with them or giving them attention, what is the main thing that you're paying attention to? Are you just always asking them how's school? Have you done your homework? How's the job going? Or are you just sitting down with them and just being like, so how's it going? How's things going in general? So think about the kind of attention you're getting. If they're testing the boundaries to get your attention, it's because they're not getting the attention that they want. So try and figure out what that is. They're also trying to determine what they can get away with as well. So like I said, teenagers are exploring their newfound freedom, and they're also becoming very, very independent. Like I said, they're young adults in the making, so just think of them that way. And they're going to test the boundaries of what's possible for them. They're beginning to discover that, hey, I can do a lot more now. I can even pass off as an adult sometimes. I'm thinking like an adult. I feel mature. I feel like I can make choices. I feel like I can make the right choices and assess what's safe and what isn't. And I can do more than what adults think I can or think I can't. So they will test boundaries to see what they can get away with, because it's all about experimentation in the teenage years. So really they're just doing it to test their own limits and also to test the limits of the boundary, because they've got places to go, they've got people to see, they've got things to do. If a boundary is in their way, they're going to, cross it, and they're going to push it to see how far they can get away with it. Teens also want to feel like they have power and control. So once again, coming back to the fact that they are young adults in the making. And as we become adults, power and control becomes very important to us. As an adult, we start to develop our own sense of self-power and our power within our community, within our jobs, within our circle of friends. And also, we work very hard to keep control as adults, keep control of our job, our health, our relationships, our finances. And when that's shattered, our lives can go into disarray, and a lot of imbalances can happen. So teenagers are starting to discover that they've got more power and that they can control more. They're not quite sure what that power and control is yet, but they definitely feel like they have it, and they want to see how far they can go with it. So that just gives you an idea of why teens test the boundaries in the first place. What I'll move on to now is when teens are testing the boundaries, what are the outcomes that they're getting out of this? So not why they're doing it, we've covered that, but what do they really get out of it? They have a big need to experiment. So the teen years are a time of figuring out who you are, what you want, uh, what you're all about, what you like, what you don't like, who you want to be, how you want to dress, how you want others to perceive you. It's all about finding out who you are, establishing your own sense of self-identity. So when they test a boundary, they'll find out how good they are at experimenting, and they will draw their own boundaries out of that. And teens will experiment in different ways. Obviously, one of the most common ways, and which can be a really negative and unhealthy way, is with drugs and alcohol. At some point, they believe 4 out of 5 teenagers will try some form of drugs or alcohol before the age of 15 or 16. That's roughly the statistic at the moment. Others are quite strong-willed and won't touch it until they're 18. Others have tried almost everything before the age of 14 or 15. Besides drugs and alcohol, teens like to experiment in other ways. You might find if you've got teenage daughters, they're changing their appearance quite regularly. They'll dye their hair, they'll cut their hair, they'll change their clothes, the different music that they listen to. Even to the same degree, the teenage boys are doing this as well. So they're finding out what works for them, what others accept of them, and what feels most comfortable. They also have a need for risk-taking behavior, and this isn't just teenagers being, bratty little teenagers. Research has found that risk-taking behavior is actually a big part of adolescent development, and it's got something to do with the brain, with the concept of safety and danger, and how teenagers are kind of walking in the middle of that. So life for them is sometimes like walking across this tightrope, a tightrope with which they might be balancing with a long pole, or they're held up by a cable. That's partly safe and that's partly dangerous. So that's kind of where they are in life. There's going to be a lot of temptations. There's going to be a lot of distractions. There's going to be a lot of choices that they're going to make. There's going to be lots of influences coming at them from their peers, from the media, from what's going on in the community and the world. So they will take risks to find out what their coping mechanisms are. That's why they're taking risks. They want to state their independence. So remember, independence is really the key when it comes to teenagers. You need to respect that independence is really important to them. It's one of their values. Sometimes they may want too much independence, where they just stay in their room all the time and don't talk to anyone. There'll be a reason that they're doing that. Teenagers do like to socialize and associate with their peers as well, but independence is very important to them as well. They're testing themselves. They're figuring out what they're capable of, how far they can push themselves, which I've talked about before, and they've got their own boundaries in place. So they're trying to figure out, what's going to work and what's not going to work in life. And of course, they're trying to test you. They're trying to test you, the parents, to see how serious you are when you set boundaries. And if you change boundaries as you go along, if you say something but then go back on what you've said, if you don't stick to your guns, your teenager will take advantage of that. It's just what they do. Now, I'm not trying to paint teenagers in a negative light in this webinar whatsoever. Personally, I do work with teenagers who are quite disadvantaged and disengaged, but this is more of general. So working with teenagers at either end of the spectrum, the really well-behaved teenagers who seem to do everything right and are great positive role models for other kids their age, down to the kid that's in jail for just maybe breaking into a car or bashing someone up. And then you've got all the other teens in between, so this appeals to teenagers of any type, of any background. They don't have sinister intentions when they're trying to test you or test others. They just have a very curious mindset. They're learning at an extremely fast rate. As we're children, up until the age of 7, we absorb almost everything that we see, hear, feel, do, and experience. As teenagers, it's more observing. So we observe other people, we observe the world, we observe ourselves to establish that sense of self-identity and what's possible in life. And then as we grow up and become adults, it's all about just keeping it together. What we've absorbed, what we've learnt, who we've created ourselves to be, and we live out that life as we become adults. So those are sort of the 3 stages. So I'm kind of getting into big picture stuff here, but I'll move on. Now, teenagers interpret boundaries very differently than you, the parents, do. Teenagers will interpret boundaries as rules and limits. So they have a negative connotation when it comes to rules. They feel like rules are not fair, that they're there to keep them down. Same with limits as well. Teens don't like to think that there's any limits. They see boundaries as your expectations, what your expectations are of them, what you expect them to do, how you want them to grow up, the kind of person you want them to be. That's how they're interpreting boundaries. They can sometimes also see them as traps or walls, so they may think that you setting boundaries is trying to keep them safe or get them to do something that they don't want to do. They can also see boundaries as walls, like this brick wall, this giant brick wall they can't get over, they can't get around it, they can't get through it, it's just in their way, and they're bashing their head against it. And they can also see boundaries as punishment for doing something wrong. And punishment is a very strong word. To teenagers, it's an even stronger word. So that's how they interpret boundaries. So in my ebook, which some of you may have read, you'll see that it's broken down into sections, and there's about 7 or 8 sections called How to Set Boundaries in Relation to ... and it's all the different topics. So in this presentation, I'm going to be talking about 3 of them. And then if you want to learn about the rest, they're in the ebook, and I'll also be talking about something else I'm bringing out later this year, which goes into more detail about all of that. But firstly, let's talk about communication. Communication is everything. When you think about it, we're communicating 24 hours a day. Even when we're not talking, we're communicating. And about 65–70% of our communication is not what we say, it's actually our body language. And if you think back to when you were young, if you have these memories in your head of your parent or parents or maybe a teacher or some adult who had authority standing over you and talking to you, telling you off about something, you may not remember exactly what they say, but you remember what they look like and how they were presented to you, don't you? If you close your eyes and just picture that, a time when you were told off, you felt really scared. You may not be able to hear what was said, some of you might be able to. If you can't, you can probably just remember, the look on the face, the way they were standing, if their voice was loud or deep or raised or angry. That's what we remember when we're younger. As we get older, we forget kind of what was said. We forget the content of what was said. We kind of more remember the context of how it was said. So when you're communicating, it's important to be really aware of your body language. How are you standing? How are you talking? What are some of the expressions on your face? It's a hard thing to be aware of. And it may just take some time where you go and stand in front of the mirror and practice talking to your teen as if they were there in the room, and just observe the way that you're standing, your stance and your voice and the expression on your face, because that's what your teen is interpreting. They don't necessarily hear all the words that you say, it's more how you say it. So getting down to the nitty-gritty parts of it now, so that's the overall concept of communication, is that 70% of it is not verbal. When you're setting boundaries, it's really important to do it with assertiveness. And assertiveness is a tricky thing to acquire because most people in life are at the either end of the spectrum. Assertiveness is in the middle. At one end you've got passiveness, and then at the other end you've got aggressiveness. Most of us are at the passive or passive half assertive end of life. So when we're at that end, the passive and slightly assertive end, we find it hard to deal with conflict. We tend to just shut off when things escalate or when someone's having a go at us. We avoid confrontation. We may not always speak up until it's too late or until things have really built up and been their worst. If someone gets stuck right into us and they've caught us off guard, we may just stand there and just kind of take it all in and be like, okay, well, yeah, look, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. So a lot of us are stuck at that end. At the other end is the aggressive end. And you know who these people are. These are the people with the road rage who, might get out of their car and abuse you for cutting them off. It's the person at the, in the shopping centre who yells at someone for not making their coffee properly. That's the aggressive end. Where I encourage people to be is in the middle, is in the assertive spectrum. And assertiveness is a difficult thing because it means we have to deal with things then and there, and we have to have a lot of self-belief. Like, I did not used to be an assertive person whatsoever. Even up until my mid-20s, I was still a very passive person. I was quiet, I always had a smile on my face, and I was always really nice to people and going out of my way for people. And I got taken advantage of, and it got to the tipping point for me where one of my previous co-workers was getting stuck into me for no reason at all, and I just sort of put up with it. And then through some coaching, my coach at the time helped me look back on a childhood experience where I was confronted by this adult who threatened me. I was about 12 at the time, and then I never told anyone about that. I kept it secret for some reason, but I found that that was kind of the trigger for me for not being assertive in life. So I looked back on all my experiences afterwards, after that time when I was approached by that guy at the age of 12, and I found that I was just putting up with stuff, and I wasn't a very assertive person. So my coach helped me identify that I needed to be more assertive, so I did some assertiveness training, and since then I've been able to confront people when I need to. I've been able to deal with things as they happen, and I've been able to stand my ground and keep my integrity intact. And that is only done when you have self-belief, and you've got to believe in what you're saying, you've got to believe in yourself to follow through. So when you're setting boundaries, it's really important to think about that. How assertive are you being? And an example I can give is, this is setting a boundary in a passive way. Okay, Michael, that was not good what you did. Do you reckon? Yeah, like, I think you should have done better, and it wasn't really good what you did. So yeah, I think maybe just stay home for a bit, until you've learnt your lesson. How do you think your teen is going to respond to that? I'm being kind of blunt here, and I do appreciate and understand that assertiveness is not available all the time. Sometimes we're just tired. Sometimes we can't deal with all the difficult stuff that comes up on a daily basis, and we just try to push it away. And I understand as parents of teens, sometimes that's how it feels. The aggressive end of that is to go right off at your teen, yell at them, not even thinking clearly, reacting rather than responding. You want to try and avoid that as much as possible, because that can really create a lot of distance between you and your teen. And history shows that when people raise their teenagers that way, it leads to all other kinds of problems. So assertiveness is where you want to be, and you can set a boundary in an assertive way like this. You sit down with your teen and you can say, "Look, Michael, I'm a bit disappointed in your behaviour the other day. Because of that, I want you home by 9 o'clock now, this Friday night. I know we said 11 o'clock before, but because of this, I want you home by 9 o'clock. If you're late, if you come after 9 o'clock and you haven't contacted me, then we'll have to look at putting more boundaries in place, and until I can gain your trust again." So that's kind of the assertive approach, and it's really important to practice that. Some other ways that you can communicate boundaries to your teenagers is you can put it in writing. So a way to do this is, if the boundaries are around maybe rules or chores with your teenager, and you're sick of telling them what they need to do, and they keep saying, "Oh, I thought I didn't need to do that," or "It's not my day to do that," or "It's not my turn," or "I did that 3 days ago." If you've got a bit of a routine for them around chores, which I think is a really good thing, put it in writing. Write it on a piece of paper, maybe laminate it, and stick it up on the fridge or in the wall in the kitchen. Make sure that there's a copy that your teen can see, and that you've also got a copy of that in case it mysteriously disappears. So that way there's no excuse for them not knowing what has to be done. If you think about it, at school they have a timetable of where they need to be, the subjects and the rooms they need to be in. So you're teaching them about that responsibility and what needs to be done. And it doesn't have to be super, super strict. You can kind of make it fun. And even if it's a big boundary in relation to trying to manage your teenager's behavior, even write some kind of a contract. You can either type it up or handwrite it in paper, and get your teenager to sign it, and you sign it as well. And this might sound a little bit kind of official and formal, but it works really well with young people. And it's something that they'll actually respect if it's done in writing. You can also emphasize what might happen to your teenager if they don't respect your boundaries. So looking at the risks, but you don't want to make threats. So you don't want to say, "If you don't do what I tell you, you're going to be in big trouble." Okay? That just opens the floor to all kinds of problems. It's more like empowering the teenager to see what the risks are for themselves instead of you trying to tell them. So if they're going out, if your teen's maybe 18 years old and he hasn't got his license yet, but a bunch of his mates do, one of them pulls up in this really loud car, picks him up, and speeds off down the road. And you worry a little bit. You think, "Oh, I hope they don't get into an accident." The following Friday, it happens again. They come and pick him up. He hops in the car for a night out with his mates. What you don't want to say to him is, You tell your mate to drive safely. I don't want that. I don't want you to crash. I don't want to have to come to the hospital and find out you've been in an accident. Your teen's just going to think, oh no, mum, it'll be fine. He's a safe driver. We're responsible. So a different way to go about it would be like, if you're going to hop in the car with your mates, that's fine. If at any time you feel unsafe or you think your mates are doing the wrong thing, just be asked to be let out or dropped off. Don't worry if they laugh at you. Just say, hey, look, I don't feel safe at the moment. Either slow down and drive responsibly or, let me out because, accidents can happen. So if you get your teen to see that for themselves and judge the risks, you're empowering them to be better choice makers. Make the situation win-win. So there has to be something in the boundary for your teen as well as you. So obviously when you set a boundary, what's in it for you is that your teen is behaving themselves, they're safe, they're secure, you know where they are and what they're doing, and the problem that caused the boundary in the first place is being rectified. But what's in it for your teen? It's not just for them to learn a lesson, it's got to be something else. If they do stick to the boundary, you should reward them for that, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a little while. Have a diplomatic approach, so be able to see both sides of the situation. See it from your teen's point of view as well as yours. And this is really important, to try and get inside your teen's mind and think about how they might be looking at this new boundary that you're putting in place. And don't make it too personal. Make it more about the moral or the message that you're trying to teach them by setting this boundary in the first place. Say what you mean with confidence and stick to your guns. So that relates to the assertiveness that I was talking about before. Be confident in what you're saying. If no confidence shows through, your teen will see that and they won't have confidence in your boundary if you're not confident in it. And sticking to your guns, if you tell them, I want you home by 9 o'clock, 5 or 10 minutes later is okay. If it's 15 minutes later and you haven't called or texted me, then we'll have to look at keeping you home for the next week or something. And if they don't come home till 9:30 and they haven't called you, tell them they can't go out for a week. Ground them and stick to your guns. And they may get really pissed off at you. They may say that they hate you for it. They don't really hate you. They just hate the situation that they're in at the time. So stick to your guns. In the long run, it's all better for them anyway. And describe the boundary specifically and visually. So saying things like, I want you home at this time. If not, there's going to be trouble. Okay, that opens the doors to all kinds of scenarios that's going to either really accelerate your teen to go behind your back or maybe get them really worried. What you could say is, I want you home by 9 o'clock. I'll be sitting here in the lounge room probably watching TV or reading a book, so I expect to see you walk in at 9 o'clock. Now you've put this picture in their mind that when they walk in, you're going to be sitting there in the lounge room, so they know that you're going to be home. So they're more likely to be home on time, and they're likely to be doing the right thing as well. Just continuing on with communication. Before you have the conversation with your teen, it's not a bad idea to write yourself a little bit of a script or some notes before you have the conversation. If they've done something quite serious that you need to think about, take that time to think about it. So maybe if you've heard they've done something at school, they come home from school, you come home from work, and you say, look, I heard what happened at school today. I'm going to have a chat about that with you later tonight. Not right now, but in a couple of hours' time we're going to have a chat. So give yourself some time to prepare. Give yourself your teen some time to think about it as well. Write down a couple of little notes or a couple of questions you want to ask. Read them and sort of memorize them before you go into the conversation. That will help the conversation about the boundary a bit more focused and concentrated. Change your language. So using a positive tone of voice and mixing up your words are really beneficial as well. Of course, the positive tone of voice is linked in with that assertiveness. So you don't want to be over positive and not be taken seriously by your teenager by saying, oh, look, you've done the wrong thing again, but you know what? We're gonna sort this problem out. They'll be like, huh? What are you talking about, Mum or Dad? More like, okay, look, this is the new boundary that I'm putting in place. You only get half an hour of internet a night. You can do what you want on that internet. That's your time, but it's only half an hour instead of an hour now until I can gain your trust. Okay, so that's setting a boundary with a positive tone of voice. Mixing up your words as well. So not using the same kind of language or the same message in every time that you talk to your teen. So you may want to say to them, look, one day you will thank me for this, but don't end every single conversation with that. One day you'll thank me for this. One day you'll thank me for this. They'll think, okay, what am I going to be thanking you for? Actually tell them. It's like, one day you'll appreciate that I was here and I was caring for you and putting these things in place because I'm going to teach you about responsibility. Make the conversation future focused, and what I mean by that is you want your teen to know that setting boundaries is not a bad thing. They do need to know that there are boundaries and that there are limitations in life, and that you really are just trying to teach them about responsibility, respect, cooperation, time management, thinking of others, and that if they develop these skills now, that's going to work really well for them in life as adults. They're going to be respected by others, they're going to have a lot of opportunities, a lot of friends, and have a good lifestyle. So future focused. You can also ask your teen questions about how they're feeling about the boundary. So after you've had the conversation and you've set the boundary, say to your teen, so how do you feel about that? And if they say, I don't like it, this sucks, don't be like, oh, alright, well, let's forget about it then. Be like, okay, I acknowledge that you feel that way. Thank you for telling me. I'm still going to follow through with this though, and I still expect you to. If you don't like the way that this is making you feel, hey, then stop misbehaving and we won't have to have this conversation. We won't have to ground you. So ask them how they feel and get them to really open up about it, but still obviously follow through on the boundary. Include your teen in the setting of the boundary, but within reason. So this is kind of where the compromise and the negotiation can come into play. Now, if you're looking at maybe grounding your teen for something that they did, start off and say, look, I'm thinking of grounding you for a week. What do you think about that? And they might say, that's too long. Does it have to be a week? So they're going to start to try and bargain with you now. And be like, all right, well, what would be fair in your eyes? And they might say, 2 days, or 1 day, or don't ground me at all. So get them to say, all right, what would be your minimum? And they may say 2 days. And then you could say, all right, I respect that. How about we take it down to 5? Would that be fair? So it's not a week, but I've taken off 2 days for you. If you can do 2 more days extra, then we're fair, we're in the middle. And they might say, okay. If not, well, at least you've offered them the chance to be included in the decision. So, cool. So we're covering some good ground here. Moving on now from communication. Obviously we could talk about that for a week, but we do need to move on. So now, setting boundaries in relation to controlling the conversation. So this is a really important part of it, because if you're controlling the conversation, you control the outcome. So you're the parent, you're setting the boundaries, and you want to be in charge. You want your teen to follow through, and if you've answered yes to all of those, that you want to be in charge, you're setting the boundaries, you're the parent, great. Now, answer these questions. Does your teen challenge your authority? Do they regularly switch off when you're talking to them? Will they tend to only follow through on some of the way, or not at all? If you've answered yes to those questions as well, that's also normal, and you're not alone. So that's the major thing there. So, being the parent of a teen and getting them to do what you want and asserting your authority is a constant work in progress. So that becomes more acceptable when you accept that your teen is an adult in the making, and I've made that point a few times now. They would rather be in charge. Sometimes they will win the argument, and they know you as well as you know them. So they know how to play the game, they can push your buttons, and they can get their way when they want to. So in a way, you need to be able to play the game back. Now, I'm not talking about going into battle with your teenager or taking part in a clash of wits or who's smarter than who, but rather just know that what the game is and how to work around it. The game is knowing what your own limitations are, what your teen's limitations are. So once you are understanding of this, then you can start to control the conversation. And this is really what you want to be able to do. Plan the talk in advance. So there's great value in this. Firstly, it gives you the time to think about the best boundary to put in place. And if the conversation is revolving around something that your teen did that got you mad, or really worried, or really disappointed, taking some time off after the fact to get yourself together and respond rather than react will make the whole conversation more effective and also less stressful on you. So when you tell your teen that you will talk to them later about what they did, so like the example I said before, he's come home from school, say you're going to talk to him in a couple of hours, this gives them time to think about that upcoming chat. You may see, you may see this as maybe using a bit of a scare tactic against your team, and they may see it the same way as well. But it can also be a way of showing your team that you will deal with it, and that you're giving them time to think about it. It's really important that you follow through and that you do actually talk to them later. If you don't and you put it off, the team can get away with what they've done, and your son or daughter will never get the boundary that they should get, or learn the important lesson that they need to learn. Know what your desired outcome is and have a few questions ready. And also be flexible around when, where, and how you have the conversation. So I'll talk about these two together. So as mentioned before, if you expect to be in control of this conversation, or in control of anything really, you need to know what your outcome is. So when you've got a clear outcome, you can manage all the different obstacles and challenges that come up along the way. And they always do. You can change your direction in order to get around them. And you can expect them before they happen. So this might sound like how we pursue our goals, but when you're setting a boundary for your team, that really is a goal. Even if it doesn't sound like it. Your goal is to create the boundary, and your team's goal is to abide by that boundary. Even if they're not really inspired by that goal, that is their goal. So they're more likely to follow the boundary that you set and see it through if there's something in it for them. And I go into more detail in this with the section of positive reinforcement, which I'll talk about in a minute. So know your outcome. So for example, if your team came home on the Friday night an hour later than they should have, you can tighten their curfew and instruct them to be home an hour earlier from now on until that they can prove that they can be on time. And then you ask your team some questions in regards to how they will go with respecting their boundary. So they might say, like, what if I'm running late and it's not my fault? Your response could be, well, call me and let me know what time you'll be home. And it needs to be a valid reason. So that's really important there. So in regards to the when, where, and how you have the chat, feel free to mix this up a little bit. I would recommend that you refrain from only talking to your teen or disciplining them at a certain time of day. For example, doing it in a certain location in a certain time of day, this almost becomes like the staple time and place for you to show your authority to your team, and it almost pigeonholes you into that area. So if you use the same time and space, it's quite limiting on you. Another way to mix it up is don't rely on the wait until your mother or father gets home syndrome, okay? So parents, mums and dads, share the load. So don't just allow one of you to be the only one who sets the boundaries or has the chats. This puts pressure on the one parent, and it can paint that parent as the authoritative one or the demanding one, and the one who only deals with the problems in your teenager's eye. So this can affect the relationship you have with you and that parent and the teenager. So some places where I recommend you wouldn't talk to your teen about setting boundaries and putting things in place is actually in their bedroom. Now you might think that that's the best place, but it's actually not, because the teen's bedroom is really the only private space that they have in the whole house. Their bedroom is their sanctuary, it's their zone, it's where they go to rest, to dream, to recharge their batteries. Their room is their identity, and it's a sacred place in the teenager years. So if you're coming into that zone intending to send boundaries and you're using that place for that reason, it's kind of going to taint the environment, which is really the only environment a teen can go to escape. You can ask them to come out of their room and have the conversation, and then they can send them back to their room afterwards to think about it. That's always really effective. Another no-go area to sit down and talk to your teen about rules or boundaries or how you're going to ground them or discipline them is at the kitchen table or the dining room table. These areas are made for preparing and eating meals, and they should remain that way. Because teens are very big on association. So what I mean by that is when they experience something that is significant and that's impacting on them, this can be reinforced and reminded to them every time they enter that environment in the future. So the kitchen or the dining room is obviously for meals and where the family gathers to share food and talk about their day. So if you use that area to discipline your teen and talk about rules and boundaries, they may become reluctant to come into that space, and this is one of the reasons why your teen will either sit quietly at the dinner table, they won't eat their food, or they won't even join the family at the table at all. So you can say at the table that you'll talk to them after dinner and mention where, and it should be somewhere else separate from the house. So with those no-go areas, where does that leave you to have these conversations with your teenagers? Some really great places I'll mention now. One of them, my favorite, is in the car. So if you're driving your teenager somewhere and it's just the two of you in the car, have a chat. In my experience as a youth worker, some of the best conversations I've had with young people was when I was driving them places. They can sit in the front, they can stare out the window or straight ahead, and they start to open up to you in all sorts of ways. Sitting in the car, it's not confronting for them because they can still communicate to you, but without that awkwardness or uncomfortable feeling of eye contact, especially if the situation's a bit sensitive or serious. And something to do with the motion of the car, the changing environment that they see throughout the window can really trigger their thoughts and feelings, and it can lead them to open up. So just create that quiet space and watch them start talking. You could go for a walk as well. Again, go away from the house and all the reminders associated with their troubles and worries and yours. And walking is also very therapeutic. Allow yourself and your teen to cover some ground first before you get into the guts of the conversation. And you can even walk to another location like a park or a cafe, sit down and have a chat. So at a cafe, of course, like I mentioned, is another great place to go. Take your teen to a cafe, buy them a coffee or hot chocolate, and, watch how much better that they'll all engage in conversation with you. If they know that they're in the wrong and you're there to talk to them about what they did, but you've offered to listen to them in a different environment and you've bought them a coffee, they're going to extend you a lot more respect and courtesy, and they may admit to some things that you didn't expect them to, and that can really work a wonder as well. So controlling the conversation, it's important to plan for it and have a good outcome, if I was to review all of that. Okay, so we're getting close to the end now, so positive reinforcement. So it's really important that when your teen follows and respects the boundaries that you reward them for it. Okay, so there's different ways that you can do this. You can just simply come out and tell your teen, hey look, I'm really proud of you, or I'm proud of the way you did that. Let them know if they've done something right and they've made an effort and they've stepped up, say, hey look, well done, good on you. Only once they've done it, of course. They have to earn that from you. You can also cook them a special meal or maybe order takeaway for dinner. Say, hey, look, well done. You've been grounded for last week, but you played by the rules. You've done well. So, the week's over. Let's get some pizzas for dinner, and then that will really just seal the deal and you can all move on. Food works well, so does money. With teenagers, you could buy them a gift or you could maybe increase their pocket money for that week. Or if they pay board or something like that, maybe offer to let that go for a week or something, and so they've got a little bit of extra money. Decide what's going to work best for you. Do something fun and social with them. Take them to the movies, take them to the footy, go for a walk, go for a drive, something like that. You can also leave notes around the house. Teenagers really like this as well because it shows that you've gone to an effort and you're communicating to them in a different way as well. So, you could leave a note just saying, hey, good job cleaning the living room. I wouldn't recommend that you send them a message through text or Facebook saying that. Do it in a more traditional way because then your teen may start to develop this communication with you through text and Facebook and about certain things. And really that should only be for sort of short-term immediate stuff between you and your parent. Like they can text you like, hey, I'm running late or I'll be home soon, not to ask you for things via text or messages because that is letting them avoid that confrontation and that responsibility. So if you're going to leave notes around for them, write it on a little piece of paper, but yeah, refrain from texting or social media. You can also introduce your teen to other adults like they were an adult as well. As they step up and they start to respect your boundaries more and more and take on more responsibility, treat them like an adult because that's how they want to be treated. Remember that they're young adults in the making. So overall, if you're doing positive reinforcement when your teen respects your boundaries, they're more likely to continue respecting your boundaries. But be careful about how much you reward them. If they've only taken a little small step, don't go out and buy them a pizza or a new video game. Maybe just say something like, good, you're doing well, keep it up. And then when they've really made a difference, then you can reward them in a bigger way. But, they've got to really work up to those rewards. Okay, so in the ebook I've written, which some of you may have read, it goes over these other sections. So I've just covered 3 sections tonight, but it also covers the sections of how to set boundaries in relation to compromise. So being flexible, not being the brick wall parent, but being willing to try different things and negotiate, within reason. Setting boundaries in relation to cooperation and responsibility. So this is about setting boundaries in terms of raising your teenagers to be cooperative and responsible young people, so they'll become cooperative and responsible adults. So they're learning to think about others, they're doing their share, they're putting others before themselves. Setting boundaries in relation to having an open mind. Don't just be my way or the highway. Don't just resort to one certain method or one belief around why your teen should be behaving and the way you set boundaries. Be willing to mix it up a bit. Talk to other parents about how they do it. Even talk to your teen about it. Depending on the situation, you could say, "What do you think I should do?" And include them. Use your best judgment on when to ask that kind of question, but have an open mind and be willing to try different things. And of course, how to set boundaries in relation to adolescent development, which I go into in quite a bit of detail in my upcoming book, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. But I just cover a few points in the ebook around adolescent development. There's adolescent development on the conscious level and on the unconscious level. Unconsciously, they're changing. Their hormones are kicking in. Emotions are running hot. Their values and beliefs are being formed, and who they are. That's the unconscious stuff. The conscious stuff is the risk-taking, is the choices that they're making, and how they're expressing themselves creatively and verbally. So setting boundaries in relation to where they are and their adolescent development is really important, and I go into that in the book as well. So if you found this information tonight has been useful, if you're looking for more information and support, I'm actually in the final stages of putting together a monthly membership program. I only mention this during my webinars. I make this exclusive for people who listen to my webinars, so that includes you. And in this monthly membership program, there will be an exclusive blog, which is invite only. And on this blog, it will be updated every week with some really good articles and some exclusive information, some stories about teens and parents who have gone through this process, and all kinds of other good stuff. You'll also receive tips and strategies and ideas from me once a week. So I'll send you an email with maybe tip of the week, a couple of different strategies, and maybe some ideas on how to have the conversation, how to respond to all the different challenges that come up as your teen grows and develops, and how you can best respond to them. So that'll be quite a mixture of tips and strategies and ideas to give you a good variety there. They may be relevant to you one week, they may not be, but you will get these and you can collect them, and they can be your database of tips and tools. You'll also get email contact with me, so as I put stuff up on the blog and send you tips and strategies and ideas, I encourage you to have a read of them. If you have any questions or want to discuss any of it with me, you can email me, and I'm happy to share what you've got to say and listen to that and have a conversation with you. And if you're having some real struggles with your teenager, or there's a specific problem that you want to talk to me one-on-one about, I'm happy to do that as well. And we can set up a time to have a chat over the phone or over Skype. I use Skype a lot, which is free. You just need a headset and you can download Skype for free off the internet. So it saves the cost of a call. And we can set up a session where we have a chat about you and your teen and what some of the struggles you're having are. So that would be like a coaching session, so I can organize that with you. And all of this for only $5 a month. The coaching session would be an additional cost, but the $5 is the access to the exclusive blog, the weekly emails with the tips, strategies, and ideas, and unlimited email contact with me. You can email me as much as you want to, and that's for $5 a month. So when you think about it, you're investing thousands and thousands of dollars into your child's life through schooling, through clothing, through toys, medical costs, food, trips you take them to. When you think about it, setting boundaries is really important, and sometimes it's an overlooked thing. For only an extra $5 a month, so it works out to be about 16 cents a day, you can get some extra tips and get some ideas which might make a difference. So if you want to email me and find out more about that, please do, and I'll provide my email address in a moment. Also, I just want to let you know of what's coming up. I mentioned before, I've got a book in the works. So by late August, early September, I will be releasing How to Set Boundaries for Teenagers at Work, the book. And this will go into a lot more detail about what I'm talking about. So the introduction ebook is very much just a summary of how to set boundaries for teenagers. This will really get into it, and we'll explore adolescent development, we'll explore communication inside out. There'll be stories in here, there'll be questions for you to answer, there'll be sheets and pages that will help you, script your conversation, and give you some tips and plans on how to set boundaries. So, consider this to be like your Bible on how to set boundaries for teenagers. So that's due out in late August, early September, and I can keep you posted about that if you email me. So if you're interested in the membership, you'd like a free copy of the ebook, which is the introduction, and be kept up to date on the progress of the book and the release date, just send me an email, and here's my email address here. So brian@magnificentpurpose.com. Magnificent Purpose is the name of my coaching business, and I do quite a few different things through that business. Primarily, one of my main focuses is working with youth and with parents. And the name Magnificent Purpose is all about helping you, the parent, and the teenager discover, what is your purpose in life, and how can we make your life's purpose really special, and and dare to be as magnificent as you can. So that's my business. I'm very passionate about it. That's my main email address. So just shoot me an email, brian@magnificentpurpose.com. Just let me know what it is you're interested in, whether it's the membership, the ebook, updates on the book, or just any general questions, and I will respond to you, within a couple of days. I just want to leave you with this quote, which is from Deborah Day. Deborah Day is a clinical psychologist based in the United States who works with parents, and she has this quote which says, "Your choice is to be active or passive in your responses." So you are a role model for your teenager, more of a role model than you may understand or believe at times. You may think your teen sometimes doesn't look up to you. If they do, that's fantastic. You might think all their role models are based in the media or the sports, but you are a role model in their life, and you're influencing them in many, many ways. And you're influencing them through what you do and through what you don't do. So even if you're taking a little bit of action or you're taking a lot of action, you really are molding your children and teenagers to be the adults that they will become. So think of how you're going to be in your responses, to all the different challenges that come up in life for your teenager. When they come to you and say, "Look, I may have done this, I need some help," what's going to be your response? You're going to be active, you're going to jump in there and help them, or you're going to empower them to deal with it, or you're going to be passive and just let it go. So really the choice is yours. Okay, so that brings us now to the end of the webinar. We're right on 10 o'clock, which is good timing. I'd like to thank you for tuning in tonight and listening. I hope I've been able to offer you some value. And I'm now happy to open the floor to any questions that anybody has. So if you have a question, feel free to type it into the chat box there, or you can raise your hand and then I'll unmute you and we can actually speak. So if anyone has a question, feel free, fire away. Okay. Okay, thanks Sam. No worries, I'm glad you appreciated the info. Just got a message here from Sam. Okay, I'm getting a question from Mario. He's just typing away now. It says, "Brian, my teenager spends too much time on the internet. How can I set boundaries around this to limit it?" Yeah, that's a great question, Mario. Tricky one as well. How much time is too much time on the internet? And I think the internet plays a part in our life now more than anything else. And it's the accessibility of it now. It's on our phones, it's on our laptops, our iPads, even our televisions. Today's teenagers, if they're 16, 15 or younger, they were born into a world where the internet was established and where it's just part of the norm. Whereas myself and all of you remember a time when there was no internet. So we depend on it a lot, we use it a lot, but we can also make that choice to stay away from it and only use it for information. Today's teenagers use it. It's a massive part of their life. They are on the internet a lot. They're using the internet for all kinds of different things. And you want to know how to set a boundary around that. Well, my question would be, are you more concerned about how much time they're spending on the internet or what they're doing on the internet? So are you aware of what they're searching the internet for? Do you have any concerns around that? If their time spent on the internet is taking up time that you would like them to be seeing doing homework or spending time with family, let them know that you're concerned that they're spending too much time. Sit down with them and say, look, Mario, you could say to your son or daughter, look, I think you're spending too much time on the internet. Would you agree? And they might be like, sometimes, or no. And you could say, well, I think 1 hour on the internet per night is plenty, okay? You can look at whatever you like on the internet, as long as it's nothing offensive or inappropriate, but it's got to be an hour a night. So you think about how you want to spend that hour, okay? And try that and see how you go. There's no point taking the internet away from your teenager altogether, because they'll go and get it somewhere else. You know, they'll get it at school, they'll get it with their friend. So, so Sam's just put a comment there. Thanks, very nice distinction and important difference. Time on the internet, time not doing, and time doing what on the internet. Yeah, definitely, Sam. Thank you for that. Yeah, I believe it is an important distinction. Don't try and cut off what it is they're spending a lot of time on. They may retaliate, they may run off and get it somewhere else. Just try and be aware of what they are using the internet for. And with teenagers, especially if you've got teenage daughters, you want them to be careful around who they're chatting to on the internet. You know, there are a lot of predators out there. So just have a chat with them in a calm, controlled way about internet safety. And I remember when I was a teenager, before internet really kind of kicked off, you know, my mates and I would go for bike rides for like 3 or 4 hours before we got our licenses. And my mum would say, you know, just be careful, so don't talk to any strangers, make sure you're back by this time, stick together, that kind of thing. Now teens are exploring their world through the internet, you know, not as much as these epic long bike rides me and my mates used to go on, but they're exploring the world through the internet, they're connecting with people through the internet. So it's the same thing, you know, just tell them be careful who you talk to, you know, stick with who you know, don't accept invitations or to meet up with anyone. You know, I'm sure you'll make the right choices, but just be aware that there's some dangerous people out there. And if it doesn't feel right, walk away from it. It's pretty much a general rule in life, and I think it should apply to the internet as well. Yep. Okay, so, alright, so Mario's just said, great, really good advice, Brian. I'll have a chat with my son about that. I don't have a daughter, but my friend has a daughter. I will pass it on to her. No worries, Mario. I'm glad I was able to help you with that. So thank you. Thank you for your question. And thank you for your input as well, Sam. Any more questions before we wrap up? No? Okay, well, I think we'll wrap it up there. We've gone over time a little bit, so thank you very much for tuning in tonight. I've really enjoyed speaking to all of you. I hope you found this useful. If you have, I am running this webinar over the next few months. So however you came across this webinar, you know, tune back into those emails or look on Facebook, and I'll keep you updated on when the next one is. Each webinar is slightly different, and sometimes it's good just to come back and listen to the same thing and get some points maybe that you didn't hear the first time around. But look, if this speaks to you and you found some value tonight, please get in touch with me. My email again is brian@magnificentpurpose.com. I'm really passionate about this. I really want to help as many parents as I can because I know there's a big need for it. And please, I'd love to hear from you and what your thoughts are, and hopefully there's some other way that I can help you. So if there's no other questions, we'll just wrap up there. Thank you very much, and have a great night.